Good afternoon, or morning, I guess it is. Thank you to President Minnis, faculty and staff, parents, all those in the special seats. It's such an honor to be here, but this day is really about the special group of people sitting in front of me. So congratulations to all of you, the Benedictine graduating class of 2017. I want to give a bit of a disclaimer. I've been told, mostly by my children, that I sometimes overestimate my sense of humor. And I don't think that's true, but on the off chance that it is, just humor me and go along with it. When I was asked to give this address, I was of course thrilled and very honored. And I wondered who had given this talk before. So I Googled, found out, some heavy hitters. Cardinal Dolan last year, Paul Ryan. And I was reminded of being at a daily mass years ago, just one of the school masses. There was a little first grade boy who was supposed to do the gospel acclamation, and that little kid stood up there, and his little paper was rattling in the microphone, and he sang, "Alleluia," and we all responded, "Alleluia," and he stood there rattling and did it again, "Alleluia," and his teacher said, read it, and he stood there. And he said right in the microphone, "Oh, what in the heck am I doing up here?" I can relate to that a little bit. What in the heck am I doing up here? When I was asked, though, I wasn't aware of all the perks. I tell you what, if you're ever asked to do a commencement speech at Benedictine, do it. You get reserved seating for your family. You don't have to wait, and get there way early for the baccalaureate mass. The highlight, though, you get carted around in this limousine golf cart with a really cute junior, student from here, taking you all around campus. That was really fun. But I did kind of wonder, what do I bring to the table as far as following up with these other speakers, Cardinal Dolan and Paul Ryan? And I thought, actually I do bring something that they didn't. I actually have 3 kids attending Benedictine, all at the same time this year. And one of those kids is a graduate today. So my second thought really was how will Luke feel about this? You have to realize I went on Luke's 8th grade class trip to Worlds of Fun. I was on the bus with the microphone, giving the instructions. I was the high school, in high school there was the CYO parish mission trip. I was the coordinator of that. So again, I was on the bus with the microphone. It was on one of those high school trips that I decided, if I'm going to have the microphone, I might as well have a little fun with it. So I asked some of the girls to feed me some lingo. And 2 of those girls are here, Gabby Ferraro and Ann Hickerson, my partners in crime in this. So they fed me some words, to use when I was on the microphone. I started using a string of them like dude and sketch and legit. Later, Luke came up to me and said, "Who told you those words?" Like they were bad words. And I said, "What do you mean, man? That's just my vernacular." And he said, "Mom, the fact that you even know the word vernacular shows that those words are not in your vernacular." So I did think, maybe he'd like to graduate from college without his mom talking on the microphone. But I ran it past him, and he was excited and gave a great reaction. And I thought, okay, I guess he's good with it. And, he's always been a good sport in that way. But if you'll indulge me for a minute, since I have the microphone, I'd like to say one kind of quick Luke story. When he was a senior in high school, he was nominated to the homecoming court, which was a big honor. So we're in the gym, the homecoming candidates are on one side, and the National Merit Scholars are on the other side. And Luke sat there, I was sitting next to him, and he kind of looked across at the National Merit Scholars, and I think, he kind of thought if he had really applied himself a little more, he might have been on that side of the auditorium. And he leaned over to me and kind of half-jokingly said, "I'm here representing the dummies." And I reacted so fast. I said, "Luke Vanderpool, you are not a dummy. You are an underachiever, and there's a difference." And I was right, because he has gone on to do wonderful things. Most of you may know, some of you may not. He came for his first semester but he's also in the Air National Guard, so he had to sit out 2 semesters to go to basic training and, do all of his training. And when we went down for his graduation from basic training, there were 2 boys, 2 separate guys that came up to me, and one of them, it was music to my ears. One of them said, "Oh my gosh, Luke was just hilarious. He just was so fun. He really lifted my spirits." Basic is a bad time. And then another boy came up and he said, "Luke was so great. He prayed with me, he encouraged me, he really lifted my spirits." And I tell you what, as a mom, that was a beautiful thing to hear. So I'd like to say, Luke Vanderpool, the real honor for me today is being your mom. Dad and I are so proud of you. I love the young man you've grown into, and I love that you are still so thoroughly yourself. From your collection of books lining your bookshelves, to the Star Wars sheets still on your bed. Oh, they don't know about the Star Wars sheets? Okay. I think he does that just to humor me. Anyway, I'm thrilled to share in your day, and thanks for always being such a great sport. So with all 3 kids in college here, I have had some people ask me, "That's so great. How did they all end up here?" Honestly, I really feel like Mark and I didn't really have a lot to do with it. They all chose Benedictine independently and for different reasons, but somehow ended up here together this year, and what a great year it's been. Paul, the younger of the boys, actually chose first, then Luke, and Grace was the most recent to come on board. She had decided full-on K-State, they had paid her dorm deposit, she had her roommate, and then she came up to Benedictine just for a fun weekend to visit some friends. Had a complete change of heart. Lucy is the youngest, she's a sophomore in high school, and has always liked to blaze her own trail. When she found out Grace had changed her mind, she got an anxious look on her face and said, "I'm afraid I'm going to go to Benedictine." Like there's some magnetic vortex that's going to suck her in. Well, turns out there is. It's called Little Sibs Weekend. Lucy came, had a great time. She's still deciding, but I think her sister is definitely putting the screws on her. I have such distinct memories of drop-off day, I'm sure a lot of you do too, for each one of the kids. And as I said, most recently with Grace, we were saying our teary goodbyes and finally parted ways. And as we were going to our car, Lucy, realizing that she was going to be going home with just her parents, kind of flung her head back in a dramatic way and said, "I don't want to be alone with you people." And we all laughed, and the tears quickly went away. And she has melted ever since. Right, Lucy? But of course, we all remember the send-off mass. All the emotions. I remember that first experience with Luke and having such a strong sense of peace that we were leaving our son in good hands. For the past 4 years, I've heard great stories of campfires down by the river, house parties at places I can't even remember, the birdcage, the lighthouse, the Jakes, the manor. From beanies and bed races to rugby games and tailgates, Benedictine is a place that invites students to jump in, experience it all, live it fully, while also calling students to rise to the occasion, step up, bring something to the table. And as I said when considering this talk, I was wondering, what do I bring to the table? Well, I've been invited to speak all over the country and even outside of the country, and whenever I introduce myself, I tell 3 things. I'm a mom, I'm a writer, and I'm from Kansas. I have a favorite Flannery O'Connor quote that speaks to all 3 of these. The writer operates at a peculiar crossroads where time and place and eternity somehow meet. His problem is to find that location. This says so much about the writing life, but really about life in general. And what a great image, especially for right here in Kansas. If you're at a crossroads around here, you can see for miles and miles in every direction. The landscape is wide open. And that landscape shapes us in very real ways. I think it brings a certain sense of optimism. We have these big open skies, plenty of room for big ideas and big dreams. We know the value of hard work. My parents taught me to do a job well, go the extra mile. And I think we're raised with a certain sense of humility. Do what you're supposed to do and don't make a big deal out of it. Parents, you've all had teenagers. I had 4 teenagers at the same time, and opportunities to grow in humility were never very far away. For example, my son Paul did a book report on Moon Over Manifest, and got a C. Sometimes when it gets a little humid, my hair gets a little frizzy and puffy, and recently, Lucy took a picture of me from behind and tweeted it out with the question, Mom or Hagrid? Yeah, thanks. But that's okay. I've gotten to experience a lot of fun things in recent years, you know, a dream come true of having a book published, and then the Newbery, you know, was just off the charts, unexpected. And, you know, then all these amazing things have happened. Shortly after the Newbery was announced, my sister, who we look a lot alike, she was at the grocery store, and she called me, it was on a Sunday, and she said, there was this guy looking at me at the grocery store, and he came up to me and he said, did you write that book? And she smiled and said, no, but that was my sister. And so we were kind of laughing, you know, we got mistaken for each other. She's 10 years younger, so that's pretty sweet. But then later the same day, I was at Target, and I was in the checkout line, and this guy was kind of looking at me. And I was like, maybe I'm getting recognized. And he came up and he said, are you that author? And I just kind of smiled like, no, I'm getting recognized. And I said, yes. And he's got this huge smile, like he was so happy. And he said, I met your sister today. So, you know, they build you up just to bring you down. But those basic Kansas values, optimism, hard work, humility, these were the tools in my backpack when I stood at that crossroads that Flannery O'Connor speaks about, ready to set off on my dream of becoming a writer. You are at a similar juncture. Imagine your own crossroads. Is it sunny and bright, full of possibilities, or is it dark and stormy and full of foreboding? Are there open roads to choose from, or does every road seem like it's still under construction? When I set off on the writing path, that road seemed bright and sunny and full of promise. But once I tried to put pen to paper, it got very dark and stormy very quickly. I remember those first attempts were more like putting a hammer and chisel to granite. I felt every word hit the floor with a painful thud. There were pitfalls and stumbling blocks and quicksand, and I knew I needed some road signs, some direction. I find that the writing life and life in general have many parallels, and for me, one very definitely informs the other. You'll take your own path and find your own way. But before any trip, it's a good idea to take stock. What do you have? What will you need? What will you collect along the way? So I thought I'd share some of the things that I've found helpful in my journey, my tools and treasures and tokens for any good journey. First of all, traveling companions. Writing is a solitary endeavor, but I knew I couldn't do it alone. I didn't want to do it alone. I needed a community, companions on the journey. Not just a yes crowd, but people who were willing to be honest and reflect me back to myself. We're big in our family on, you know, friends. We're kind of a tight community where we live. My nephew, actually at school, I think they were talking about, you know, how many parts of the Mass are there? And I guess he was told there are 2, and he didn't think that was right. He said, no, there's 4. Liturgy of the Word, Liturgy of the Eucharist, coffee, and donuts. And, you know, so we need that. We need people. We need people in our lives. In terms of writing, I was invited to join a critique group, fellow travelers along the writing path. And the first few times I read were very scary. I felt vulnerable. Sometimes as a writer, especially as an early writer, we experience 2 extremes. We think that what we're writing is wonderful, and it's not. Or we think that what we're writing is terrible, and it's not. So it's important to know if what we're putting out there is being received in the way we think it is. Again, this is true not just in writing, but in life in general. When Grace was 12 or 13, somebody in the family got something and she didn't. I'm acting like I can't remember, but I know exactly what it was. And she came up to me and was complaining and, you know, implying that something was unfair. And I said, well, you make it sound like I play favorites. And she looked at me and said, well, you do. And I was surprised. I said, who? She said, Lucy. And I just looked at her, kind of sad. I said, oh, no, sweetie, it's Paul. Paul's my favorite. And, you know, once we got that figured out, we were all fine. So we need those people who love us and care about us, and we need them to reflect us back to ourselves. Who are your traveling companions? And I'm not talking about contacts or people who can further a career or somebody who knows somebody, but real relationships. I have to say, I know how to pick them. I have great friends, just ask them. And most importantly, I have a great husband, a wonderful, lifelong traveling companion. One thing I've learned along the way is be intentional about who you surround yourself with. Gravitate towards people who bring joy and goodness into your life, and be the kind of person who offers that in return. Be open and welcoming to the stranger you meet on the road. Some of the warmest and most gracious encounters I've had in recent years have been with taxi drivers and people I just happened to sit next to on the plane. I was on the book tour for my second book, and there was a lot of getting to and from, and there was this driver that came to pick me up, and we had about an hour drive to get where we were going, and I had a terrible influenza-like cold that I was still coming off of. So I get in the back of the car, and I'm just hacking and coughing, and that in the front seat, he just held up this little Halls, and he said, "Would you like a cough drop?" And I said yes, and I took the cough drop, and just that little gesture, that little act of kindness just opened up this whole conversation. And he had the same flu I had. We were comparing symptoms, and he had this and I had that, and I said, "I have coughed so much, I've given myself hemorrhoids." And he said, sorry, Luke, he said, "Oh, honey, I know what you mean. There's so much pressure, it's just got to come out somewhere." And we bonded in that hour. And I really did. I felt very cared for, very tended to. So sometimes those chance encounters aren't really chance, and small talk isn't always small. So another one along the things that I've learned along the way involves travel directions. We all need maps, road signs. So in that early critique group, I got some feedback, but this was a group of writers and readers who were all farther along the writing path than I was. They used words like juxtaposition and verisimilitude, and I knew I had some catching up to do. So I ventured down this road of craft. I began reading books on writing and reading from a writer's perspective. There's lots of good writing advice out there. Words of wisdom from Eudora Welty and Flannery O'Connor and Wendell Berry. But if we're talking best advice, best traveling directions, the best I ever got about writing and life in general was from my mom, who is here, and she's probably a little curious and maybe a little worried about what I'm going to say. Moms all have those sayings that we grow up with. In our house, there was, "Don't use the good towels," which I never really understood that. "If we all pitch in, we'll be done in 5 minutes," which sounds good in theory, but is never true. One of her more quirky ones might be a cold, wintry school morning, and we were loading the car for her to take us to school, and sometimes the engine doesn't start. You get that sound. Most people would maybe get out, look under the hood. My mom would say, "Everybody be quiet and say Hail Mary." But the best advice came from my mom on our family road trips. Every summer we took a 3-week vacation in a Holiday Rambler travel trailer. And I might be driving along with my nose in a book, and she'd say, "Look up, pay attention." And I'd look up and see something amazing like the ocean or Niagara Falls or the Grand Canyon or something I might otherwise have missed. So that's the next one. Look up, be present, pay attention. And I did. For a writer, or as Wendell Berry says, a complete human being, that's half the equation. Being attentive, being open to life's experiences. What is the amazing thing right in front of you that is just waiting for you to look up and pay attention? What's on the horizon that you don't want to miss? The next one I call have walking shoes that fit. Eudora Welty, in some of her writing, talks about finding your voice. In writing, we hear about that a lot. What does that mean? There's a quote from Moby Dick that was the catalyst for Moon Over Manifest. "It is not down on any map. True places never are." That idea of a true place really resonated with me. Not only a geographical true place, but the truest place within ourselves. And Melville is right. It's not down on any map. It's that quiet voice deep within. That voice that speaks in a whisper and is unique and special to each one of us. In those early stages of writing, I think as early writers, we all do this, we start in some form of imitation, trying to adopt the voice of a beloved author. For me, it was Madeleine L'Engle. And so I think a lot of those early attempts were difficult because it was like trying to write in someone else's shoes. And that's uncomfortable. They're too big and they rub us, or they're too tight and they pinch, they don't fit. I could sound a little like Madeleine L'Engle, but it came off as a cheap imitation because it was. I'm not her. I don't have her life experience to draw from. I only have my experiences and memories, my worldview, my sense of humor. My kids might sometimes wish that I had someone else's humor, but it's the only one I have. I learn things from my characters, and one of the characters in my new book says, "It's okay to put your best foot forward, but the other one's going to catch up sooner or later." I love that. In other words, be yourself. Be authentic so that your best foot isn't too out of step with the one coming right behind it. We all have to listen for that quiet voice within, that thing that is unique and special to each of us. Finding your voice is not a one-time shot, and it's not always easy. I mentioned that paying attention is half the equation. The other half is being still. We live in a very busy and noisy world. If you want to hear that inner voice, it takes a conscious effort to quiet ourselves and orient our minds and hearts to hear it. What is the thing that only you can do in the way that only you can do it? Where is your inner voice leading you? Do your shoes fit? The best thing to carry in your back pocket is a good sense of humor. Now, as I say, my children seem to think I don't have one, or that I greatly overestimate mine. You be the judge. Okay, so there was this one time, we had been building onto our house, and my husband framed in this whole family room, and then kind of after it was framed in, we decided we wanted a fireplace in the corner. Well, there's all kinds of rules and regulations for this, so they said, no, you can't put it in the corner because of this and that. And so it was the end of a long day for me. My kids were all little. Mark was coming home. I'm ready to do the big handoff. He comes in. He's like, he's beat too, like I was, and he said, the fireplace guy's coming over. I was like, oh, great. Okay, so the fireplace guy comes. He's in the same boat, kind of gritchy. He says it's been a long day. So we're all in the same mood. He goes in the room. He takes his tape measure, and he shoves it this way and that way, and he says, well, I can tell you right now, your problem's going to be the flu. And I said, what? You're going to be too sick to put it in? See, I knew that was funny. A good sense of, well, the whole room changed. The whole vibe changed. We laughed. It was like the endorphins just kicked in, and he ended up staying for 2 hours. So a good sense of humor can change everything. It can make burdens lighter, dark days brighter, and long days way more fun. There's power in a story. I was in Nebraska for an event, and a boy came up to me and just looked right at me and asked me why I did something I did in my book. I paraphrased. He said, what about Ned? Ned's this character in the book. Why did you do that to him? That's what he asked me. And I was shocked, and I gave the best answer I could. I said, sometimes hard things happen to your characters, and you have to follow your characters. And I signed his book, and as he was walking away, this is like an 11-year-old boy, he looked at me again, and he said, made me cry. And it was kind of just like an indictment. And I thought, I knew that as a reader, but that was the first time I knew it as a writer. The power of words, the power in a story. And we need to remember our stories, reflect on them. What's interesting is they can seem ordinary at first, but in looking back, in remembering, those ordinary stories can become extraordinary. That's how we commemorate things. We tell our stories at weddings and funerals. Remember that time? Remember when that happened? You'll do that when you leave here. Remember when? Albert Einstein once said, look deep into nature and you will understand everything better. We can broaden that sentiment a bit. Look deep into your stories, the ordinary, the everyday, the small and seemingly insignificant, and not only will you find understanding, but beauty and grace and joy. And the last one, as far as things to take on a trip, is a groovy pair of shades. And by that, I mean, kind of what is the lens that we look through? For me, I like to think in terms of imagination. We hear it described as Catholic imagination or Christian imagination, although I don't think we necessarily have a corner of the market on this. But the belief, the certainty that God is revealing himself, his grace, his love through everything around us. I kind of would describe it as a kaleidoscope. If you look through a kaleidoscope at one end, it's got these little shards of glass, colored glass or plastic, and that's all it looks like. But when you look through it the proper way, it becomes this amazing array of colors and shapes and designs. And that imagination, in that respect, is there when we need it. And I know for me, several years ago, we had the unfortunate time of having to take my dad to a nursing home. And We took him out there, and just even partway there, he started getting these anxious furrows in his brow and a look of confusion and anxiety, and those things were just not part of my dad's everyday life. So that first day was really tough, taking him there, trying to explain things and settle him in. Well, the next day I went out, and I said, well, why don't we go down to the chapel? My parents have been daily mass goers, and I thought, that would be someplace familiar. My dad had memory issues, dementia, and I thought that would be someplace familiar and kind of solid that he could see and sit there. So as we were walking down the hall, we passed this room that was under construction, and there was this particle board, and you could hear hammering and drills, and my dad just ran his hand along that particle board, and the lady that was wheeling him stopped. And I said to her, my dad was always a big handyman, and she said, well, Leo, I bet this has a lot of memories for you. And as he touched that, I really expected him to start critiquing and say, you know what they need to do, but he just sat there, and the worry lines went away, the confusion went away, the anxiety went away, and I thought, a hammer isn't just a hammer, and a particle board isn't always just particle board. Through that lens of that kind of imagination, they become avenues of grace and expressions of love. They are wordless ways God says, I am with you. You are not alone. I'm confident that you all have wonderful roads, wonderful stories ahead of you. You'll go on to do great things, I have no doubt. But truly great things always start with little things, little gestures, encounters, graces. And it's all the little things that make up our life, our own story. They're the things we collect on our journey and tuck away in our backpack. This is such an exciting time for all of you. And the great thing is, you're not starting out with an empty backpack. You already have provisions tucked away, your own life experiences that you've collected so far. In many very important ways, you already have the essentials: faith, integrity, gratitude, and love. You'll continue to grow and mature and have life experiences that will broaden your mind and your world, and you'll tuck those away, and they'll be there when you need them. What tokens and treasures do you already have stashed away? What treasures do you have from your years at Benedictine? As you prepare to leave Benedictine, you'll probably hear a lot of people welcoming you to the real world. Don't ever let anyone tell you that the last 4 years were not real. Hopefully, they were full of fun and excitement and adventure, and yes, you'll have times in your life that are going to be more challenging and less fun, but you'll need to draw on your experiences here. The things already in your backpack, the friendships, the curiosity, the wonder of it all. And since I'm a parent, let me say something on behalf of all of us, parents. We love you. We're here for you. Of course, you're going to have to make your own way. You're going to have to start paying your own bills. Hopefully, you're going to have to figure out things on your own. Grace texted me maybe a month ago, said, quote, woke up and my bottom retainer was no longer in my mouth. Hopefully, I find it. Some things you're just going to have to figure out on your own. But we want you to know, in all the important ways, we're here for you. So in closing, I thought, there's only one thing worse than having your mom on the microphone at your college graduation. And that's having your mom singing on the microphone at your college graduation. Feelings. I'm just kidding, that's not really Actually, it's a song that was from the communion hymn at your send-off mass 4 years ago. This is the actual program. And when you listen for that creative voice within you, it's deeply connected to the voice of the creator of us all. These were wonderful send-off words then, and I think they're even more meaningful today. I won't sing it, but do not be afraid, I am with you. I have called you each by name. Come and follow me. I will bring you home. I love you, and you are mine. So with that, if you love a quest, the road untaken, the path of great resistance, then take up your walking stick and set off to find that crossroads where time and place and eternity meet. Thank you, and congratulations.